The first time I had heard my son's voice in 5 years, it was a beautiful, sunny melody of love and regret, a voice I had ached to hear for what felt like a lifetime. He told me he was sorry. He told me he missed me. And then he told me that he was ready, finally, for me to meet my grandson. I took a slow, steady breath, and I asked him the quietest, most honest, and most exquisitely cruel question of my entire life. Which son? Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Clara. My name is Clara Miller. I am 79 years old, and for the past 2 years, my home has been here, in a small, quiet town on the coast of Florida. Though for my entire life before that, I was a farmer's wife from the rolling plains of Nebraska. This story, my goodness, this is a story about a question. A single, simple, and soul-shattering question that was the culmination of 5 years of silence and a lifetime of love. It is a secret I have held in my heart like a burning coal. Even my own sister, God rest her soul, never knew the whole, unvarnished truth of why my son and I are estranged. She knew he had broken my heart. She did not know that I, in the end, was the one who had quietly, and with the most profound and satisfying finality, broken his. There is a particular kind of pain, you see, that is reserved for a mother who is cut off by her own child. It is not a loud, violent pain. It is a quiet, slow, and suffocating one. It is the pain of being erased, of having your entire life, your every sacrifice, your boundless love deemed worthless. The shame of it is a living thing. It makes you feel like a ghost in your own life, haunting the memories of a child who is still alive, but who is to you lost forever. And for a very long time, I was that ghost. But I am telling this story now because I am done with being a ghost. I have learned that sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to cauterize it. And I am telling it for any parent or any child who has ever felt the cold, terrible silence of a family torn apart by things that should never have been more important than love. Before I begin this difficult, and I must confess, rather triumphant story, I would be so very grateful for your kindness. My heart still beats a little fast when I think of that phone call. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support, your simple act of listening, it is a great comfort. It gives this old woman the strength to finally dial back into the past and tell you the whole, unvarnished, and beautifully calculated truth. Thank you, my dears. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. My story, the happy part, the part that now feels like a beautiful, faded dream, began on 300 acres of black, fertile Nebraska soil. It began with my husband, my John. He was not a complicated man. He was a farmer. A good one. He was a man made of earth and sun and a quiet, unshakable integrity that was as solid and as real as the land he worked. He was born on this land, as was his father before him. The farm, which we called Miller's Crossing, wasn't just his job. It was his heart, his soul, his legacy. Our life was not an easy one, but it was a good one. It was a life dictated by the seasons, by the sun and the rain. It was a life of early mornings and long, aching days, of the smell of turned earth in the spring and the sweet scent of hay in the summer. It was a life of shared burdens and simple, profound joys. A good harvest, a healthy calf, a summer storm that broke a long drought. We weren't just husband and wife. We were partners, in the truest sense of the word. He was the strength, and I was the heart. He worked the land, and I worked the home. Our little farmhouse, the one his grandfather had built, was always filled with the smell of baking bread, of coffee percolating on the stove, of clean laundry drying on the line. We didn't have much money, but we were rich in all the ways that truly mattered. We had one child, our son, our Michael. Oh, he was our golden boy. The sun rose and set on him. He had his father's handsome face and my stubborn chin. He was the center of our small, hard-working world. Every hope, every dream, every prayer we had was for him. He was not just our son. He was the future of Miller's Crossing, the next link in the chain. I can still feel the weight of his small hand in mine, as we would walk out to the garden to pick beans for dinner. I can still see the dusting of flour on his nose, the summer I taught him to make my apple pie, his little hands so clumsy and earnest as he tried to crimp the crust. I remember the fierce, aching pride I felt watching him on his father's lap on the big green John Deere tractor, his small hands on the giant steering wheel, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated joy. He was a good boy, a happy boy. He loved this land. He loved us. I never, not for a single solitary second, doubted the goodness in his heart. His father and I, we were determined to give him more than we had. Not just the farm, but an education. We saved every penny. We went without so that he could have. He was smart, our Michael. He did well in school. But he was a dreamer. He had a restlessness about him, a yearning for a world beyond our cornfields. He wanted to go to college, to study finance. His father was hesitant. Everything a man needs to know. He can learn from the land, Clara, he would say to me in the quiet of the evenings. But I pushed for it. I wanted my son to have choices I never had. So we sent him. We used our life savings to send him to the state university. And that is where our world, our safe, simple, beautiful world, began to crack. It was a crack so small at first, you would have missed it if you weren't looking. A hairline fracture in the foundation of the boy we thought we knew. It was there that he met Jennifer. And it was there that the son we had raised began to slowly, imperceptibly, disappear, replaced by a stranger we did not recognize until it was far, far too late. Michael came home from his first year of college a slightly different person. The change was subtle, a small shift in the way he carried himself, the way he spoke. He had a new way of talking, a quicker, more confident cadence, and he was full of new ideas, new words. He spoke of capital markets and investment portfolios and leveraging assets. He looked at our farm, the farm he had once loved, with a child's simple joy, with new, appraising eyes. "You know, Dad," he said one evening, as we all sat on the porch, "the farm is an asset, a huge asset, but it's an underperforming one. We should be thinking about diversification, about maximizing its value." My John had just smiled, his slow, kind, and slightly amused smile. "The only value I'm interested in maximizing, son, is the time I have left on this earth to watch the corn grow," he'd said. "Some things are more important than a balance sheet." Michael had just shaken his head, a look of fond, pitying condescension on his face. The look of a man who believes he is speaking a new, more evolved language that his simple, old-fashioned parents cannot possibly understand. He was not a bad boy. He was just dazzled by a world of quick money and shiny, material success, a world so different from the slow, patient, and often brutal world of farming he had grown up in. He was a boy caught between two worlds, and I could feel him slowly, inexorably, being pulled towards the one that glittered. And then, during his junior year, he brought Jennifer home. And she was, from the very first moment, a creature from a different planet. She was studying to be a corporate lawyer. She was the daughter of a wealthy developer from the city. She was beautiful, she was intelligent, and she was the most ambitious young woman I had ever met. She moved through my simple, comfortable farmhouse like a panther in a henhouse, sleek, powerful, and utterly out of place. She was, of course, a masterpiece of politeness. Her charm was dazzling. She complimented my home, but in a way that subtly underlined its lack of sophistication. "Oh, Clara, this is just so authentic," she'd said, running a perfectly manicured finger over the worn, hand-carved mantelpiece my husband's grandfather had made. "It's like stepping into a museum of a simpler time." She was not admiring my home. She was curating it, placing it in a historical exhibit that she, a modern woman, was just visiting. And my son, my Michael, he was a man, utterly, completely, and hopelessly undone. He followed her around the house like a puppy, his face a mask of pure, dazed adoration. He was so proud of her, so desperate for her approval. He looked at his own life, his own simple country past, through her sharp, sophisticated, and deeply judgmental eyes. And for the first time, I could see that he was ashamed of it, and ashamed of us. That first dinner was a quiet, agonizing performance. I had made his favorite meal, a pot roast with potatoes and carrots from my own garden. Jennifer had looked at it, and she had smiled her brilliant, beautiful, and utterly devastating smile. "Oh, Michael, darling," she'd said, with a little tinkling laugh. "You didn't tell me your mother was so traditional. It's charming. But all these carbs, my trainer would have a heart attack." She ate a single, polite bite of a carrot and spent the rest of the dinner talking about a charity gala she was chairing in the city. I watched my son. I watched him watch her. And I saw the way he looked at the simple, hearty food on his plate. The food he had loved his entire life, as if he were seeing it for the first time. As if he were seeing it as something to be ashamed of. I knew, in that moment, with a mother's terrible, unerring intuition, that I had lost him. He had chosen. He had chosen her world over ours. He had chosen the shiny, new, and exciting story over the old, familiar, and loving one. They married a year after they graduated, in a lavish, breathtakingly expensive ceremony in the city that my John and I were not asked to contribute to, but were merely invited to attend, like distant, slightly embarrassing relatives. They built a beautiful life, a perfect life. They bought a massive house in an exclusive gated community. They drove expensive cars. They had a son, my grandson, a beautiful little boy named Thomas, a boy I was told about in a brief, excited phone call, but whom I was not invited to see for the first 3 months of his life. "We're just so swamped, Mom," he would say, his voice always rushed, always distant. "The baby is a handful, and Jennifer is working on a huge case. It's just not a good time for visitors. You understand." Of course, I understood. I always understood. I was the mother. I was the one who was supposed to understand. After my John passed away 5 years ago, the distance became a chasm. He died in the spring, just before the planting season. It was the first time in 55 years that I had to face the vast, empty, and silent fields alone. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. And my son was a voice on the phone. He was so sorry. He was devastated. But he could not come home for the funeral. "Jennifer has a huge trial she's prepping for, Mom," he'd said, his voice thick with a genuine, if distant, sorrow. "It's the biggest case of her career, and I can't possibly leave her alone with Tommy right now. It's impossible timing. You understand, don't you?" I did not understand. I did not understand how a son could not come to his own father's funeral. But I said that I did. I was a ghost at my own husband's graveside, surrounded by kind, loving neighbors, and the one person I needed, the one person who could have held my hand, was 100 miles away, supporting his wife's career. The final, brutal, and unforgivable cut came a month after the funeral. The farm, it was too much for me. I was 74 years old. I could not run it alone. My heart was broken, and my body was tired. I had to sell it. The sale of the land that had been in my husband's family for 100 years, was the hardest, most painful decision of my life. I called my son. I called him to tell him. I thought he would be heartbroken. I thought he would want to be there, to say goodbye to his own history. But he was not heartbroken. He was relieved. "Oh, Mom, thank God," he'd said, his voice a bright, sunny melody of relief. "Jennifer and I have been so worried about you, rattling around in that big old house. It's the right decision, the logical decision. It's a huge asset, just sitting there. You can take the money, you can buy a nice little condo somewhere, and you can finally, truly retire. You can be free. You can be free." He did not hear that he was talking about his own childhood home. He did not hear that he was talking about my heart. He heard only the language his wife had taught him so well. The language of assets, and of logic, and of the cold, hard, and unforgiving bottom line. And then he said the words that would, in the end, change everything. "Listen, Mom," he said, his voice now full of a new, bright, and helpful energy. "When the sale goes through, You're going to have a lot of capital, and you are not going to know what to do with it. You need a professional. You need a plan. Let me handle it. I can invest it for you. I can make it grow. I can give you the kind of security Dad always wanted for you." He was not offering to help his grieving mother. He was making a business proposition. He was pitching a new client. His new client was me. And the asset he wanted to manage was my entire life. The 5 years that followed were a masterclass in the art of silence. A long, slow, and profoundly lonely lesson in what it means to be truly and completely erased. I did what he said. Of course I did. I was his mother. And I was a woman from a generation that was taught to trust the experts, the men in the suits who understood the secret, complex language of money. The farm was sold. A lifetime of my husband's sweat and toil, a century of his family's history, was converted into a single staggering number on a bank statement. And my son, my brilliant, loving son, he handled it for me. He took that staggering number, and he made it disappear into a labyrinth of investment portfolios and mutual funds and long-term annuities that I did not understand. He would send me statements, of course. Thick, glossy statements filled with charts and graphs and a language that was as foreign to me as ancient Greek. "It's all growing beautifully, Mom," he would say in his brief, efficient quarterly phone calls. "You are completely secure. You don't have to worry about a thing." I didn't worry. What was the point of worrying? The money was no longer real to me. It was an abstraction, a ghost of a number, a life that I had once lived, that was now being managed by a stranger who happened to be my son. I bought this small condo in a quiet retirement community an hour away from the city where they lived. I hoped that if I were closer, I would see them more. I would see my grandson. I was a fool. In those 5 years, I saw my son a total of 6 times. 6. He was always so busy, so important. His work was so demanding. Jennifer's career was taking off. My grandson Tommy had his private school, his soccer practice, his piano lessons. Their life was a beautiful, intricate, and perfectly scheduled machine, and I was a piece that no longer fit. The phone calls, which had been quarterly, became semi-annual. And then they just stopped. Birthdays were forgotten. A card would arrive, a week late, with his name and his wife's, signed in her perfect, impersonal script. Christmas was a courier-delivered box from a fancy department store, containing a cashmere scarf in a color I would never wear, a gift chosen not by my son, but by his assistant. I was not just an afterthought anymore. I was a task on a subordinate's to-do list. The pain of it, my goodness, the pain of it was a living thing. It was a cold, heavy stone in my chest that was my constant companion. It was there when I woke up in the morning, and it was there when I lay in bed at night, staring into the darkness, listening to the silence of my own empty life. The silence was the worst part. The absolute, profound, and deafening silence from the one person in the world whose voice I still ached to hear. I would have conversations with him in my head. I would tell him about my day. I would ask him about his. I would tell him that I loved him, that I missed him, that my heart was broken. But the phone never rang. I learned to live with the ghost of the son I had lost. I made a small, quiet life for myself. I joined a bridge club. I volunteered at the local library. I made friends. But it was a life built on a foundation of a deep and abiding shame. "And what about your son, Clara?" my new friends would ask, their voices full of a gentle, friendly curiosity. "Does he live nearby?" And I would have to smile my bright, brittle, and practiced smile, and I would have to lie. "Oh, he's in finance," I would say, my voice full of a false maternal pride. "He's so brilliant, and so terribly, terribly busy. We don't get to see him as often as I'd like." No. The lie was a small, sharp, and bitter little stone in my own mouth. And then, one day, the silence was broken. Not by a phone call, but by a letter. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was going through my mail, Bill's junk mail, a catalog for comfortable shoes. And there it was, a brightly colored, slightly garish envelope, the kind of thing you usually throw away without opening. It was from one of those sweepstakes companies. "You may already be a winner," it screamed, in big, bold letters. I don't know why I opened it. Perhaps it was just boredom. The quiet, endless boredom of a lonely life. It was not a sweepstakes. It was an advertisement. An advertisement for the new state lottery. A new, multi-state Powerball with a jackpot that had grown to a staggering, almost unbelievable size. $450 million. I looked at the number, and I laughed. A small, sad, and bitter little laugh. It was a number from a different universe. A universe of dreams and wild, impossible fantasies. A universe I had not lived in for a very, very long time. And then I did something I had not done in my entire 77 years of practical, sensible, and logical life. I took my purse. I walked down to the little corner store at the end of the street, and I bought a lottery ticket. I didn't let the machine pick my numbers. I chose them myself. They weren't random. They were the numbers of my life. My birthday. My husband's birthday. The day my son was born. The day he got married. The day his own son was born. And the last number, the Powerball. The day my John had died. It was a silly, sentimental, and utterly foolish thing to do. A quiet, private little prayer sent out into the vast, indifferent universe. A story of my life, told in 6 small and completely meaningless numbers. I put the ticket in the little porcelain dish on my bedside table, the one where I kept my wedding ring. And I forgot about it. Completely. The drawing was on a Saturday night. I didn't watch it. I was in bed, reading a book. The next morning, I was drinking my coffee and reading the Sunday paper. And there it was. A small, unremarkable story on the bottom of the front page. Single winning Powerball ticket sold in coastal Florida. And it listed the winning numbers. My heart did not stop. My breath did not catch. I simply put down my coffee cup and I walked with a slow, steady, and dreamlike calm into my bedroom. I picked up the small, flimsy piece of paper from the porcelain dish. And I looked at it. And the numbers of my life, they were all there. I just sat there, on the edge of my bed, and I read the numbers again. And again. And again. It didn't feel real. It was a number so vast, so life-altering, so utterly impossible, that my mind, my practical, sensible, bookkeeper's mind, could not quite comprehend it. I did not laugh. I did not cry out with joy. I just sat there, in my quiet, lonely condo, and I wept. I wept for my John. I wept for the beautiful, simple, and loving life we had lost. And I wept for the son who was a stranger to me, the son who did not know that his mother, the forgotten, inconvenient, and worthless old woman he had cut out of his life, was now, by some strange and terrible and beautiful miracle, one of the richest women in America. One of the richest women in America. The world had tilted on its axis. The game had changed. And I, the quiet, forgotten, and invisible woman, had just been handed the most powerful, most devastating, and most beautiful weapon imaginable. The silence, I knew, was about to be broken. The phone, the one that had been so cruelly, so completely silent for 5 long years, was about to ring. And I, the mother who had ached for the sound of her son's voice, would be ready, and I would have a question for him. A simple, quiet, and utterly devastating question. A question that had been waiting, in the silence of my own broken heart, for 5 long and very, very lonely years. The morning after I discovered that I was, by some absurd and beautiful miracle, a multimillionaire, the world felt different. The air was sharper. The colors were brighter. The quiet, gray and lonely fog I had been living in for 5 long years had finally, and with a sudden, shocking finality, burned away. But I was not a different person. I was a farmer's wife. I was a bookkeeper. I was a woman who understood the value of a quiet, methodical, and carefully executed plan. My first instinct was not to celebrate. It was to protect. My first phone call was not to my son. It was to the best and most discreet trust and estate lawyer in the state of Florida. Her name was Mrs. Davenport, and she was a legend. I had read about her. She was a woman who protected the fortunes of the very, very rich, and she did it with the silent, ruthless efficiency of a shark. I did not tell her a long emotional story about my son. I told her a simple, logical, and practical one. I have come into a significant amount of money, I said, my voice calm and steady. And I am an old woman, with a son who is a financial advisor, a son from whom I am estranged. I need to protect my assets. I need to become invisible. She had looked at me, a flicker of something, respect, understanding, in her sharp, intelligent eyes. I understand completely, Mrs. Miller, she'd said. The plan we devised was a masterpiece of legal and financial misdirection. We created a series of anonymous, ironclad, and utterly untraceable trusts. We set up a private foundation. The lottery winnings, a sum so vast it was almost comical, were claimed not by me, Clara Miller, a lonely old woman in a small-town condo, but by a blind trust, represented by a high-powered Miami law firm. To the world, the winner of the great Powerball jackpot was a mystery. And then, with a small but significant portion of the money, I began to build my new life. A quiet life. A life that was entirely and beautifully my own. I did not buy a mansion. I did not buy a yacht. I bought this small, beautiful, and quiet house on the ocean. I bought a comfortable car. I bought a new, top-of-the-line sewing machine. And I began, for the first time in 5 long years, to live. But my new life was not just a life of quiet, personal joy. It was also a stage. A carefully constructed and beautifully baited trap project. I knew, with the certainty of a mother who knows her own child's heart, that the news of my good fortune would, eventually, reach my son. The world is a small place, and a $450 million secret is a difficult one to keep. So, I prepared my story. The story I would tell when he finally, inevitably called. It was a story of quiet, lonely, and deeply philanthropic generosity. With the help of my foundation's lawyers, I began to make a series of large, anonymous donations to charities. But they were not random charities. They were charities that I knew, from my years as his mother, would resonate with my son. A new wing for the music department at his old university. A scholarship fund for aspiring young musicians from rural towns. A large donation to a local animal shelter, in the name of the old beloved golden retriever of his childhood. Each donation was a quiet, carefully placed breadcrumb, a trail leading directly back to the heart of the mother he had abandoned. And then, I made my final move. The one that was designed not just to be a breadcrumb, but to be a flare, a blinding, unmissable beacon that he could not possibly ignore. There was a small, struggling orphanage in the town where I had grown up, a place I had volunteered at as a girl, a place I had taken Michael to, as a boy, to deliver Christmas presents. It held a small but significant place in our shared history, and it was on the verge of closing its doors forever. My foundation, anonymously, bought the orphanage. We paid off its debts. We established a permanent, multi-million-dollar endowment to secure its future. And we built a new, beautiful, state-of-the-art music and art center for the children. The story, of course, was all over the local news in my old home state. The story of the mysterious, anonymous, and unbelievably generous benefactor who had saved the old Miller Street orphanage. I knew that he would see it. I knew that he would know. Quiet, wealthy old woman, with a sudden, inexplicable interest in a small, forgotten orphanage from his own childhood. The breadcrumbs would all lead to one single, and for him, earth-shattering conclusion. His mother, his forgotten, inconvenient, and worthless mother, was the anonymous benefactor. His mother was a multi-millionaire. The trap was set. The bait was laid. The board was arranged. All I had to do now was wait for the phone to ring. It took a week. I knew it was him. Of course it was him. For 5 long years, this phone had been a symbol of my own erasure, a silent testament to my worthlessness in his busy, important life. Now, it was a weapon. My weapon. And it was time to fire the one, single and beautifully calculated, shot I had been preparing for a year. Hello? I said, and my voice was a perfect, flawless imitation of the lonely, slightly frail, and forgotten old woman he thought I was. Mom? Oh my God, Mom, is that really you? The voice on the other end was a masterpiece. It was a symphony of love and frantic, tearful relief. It was my son, Michael, and he was giving the performance of a lifetime. Michael, honey, I said, my voice trembling with just the right amount of weak, hopeful disbelief. Is that you? Oh my goodness, I haven't heard from you in so long. I was so worried. You were worried, he said, and his laugh was a beautiful, brilliant cascade of joyous, loving disbelief. Mom, I have been trying to reach you for weeks. Your old number was disconnected. I thought, oh God, Mom, I thought something terrible had happened to you. I was about to hire a private investigator. We've been so worried, we've been sick with worry. Writing. The lie was so audacious, so beautifully constructed, it was almost a work of art. He had not called me in 5 years. But in his new story, the one he had so quickly and so brilliantly invented, he was the devoted, terrified son, desperately searching for his lost, beloved mother. Oh, I said, my voice a small, bewildered whisper. I'm so sorry, dear. I moved. After the money came in. It was all so overwhelming. I needed a change. Nandirain. Course you did, he gushed, his voice a smooth, reassuring purr of loving, complete understanding. And we are so happy for you, Mom. My God, a lottery winner. It's a miracle. We saw the story about the orphanage. We knew it had to be you. So generous, so kind. It is the most wonderful news in the world. He paused, letting the beautiful, loving words hang in the air. And then he got to the point. And listen, Mom, he continued, his voice now taking on a new, more serious, and deeply intimate tone. The reason I was calling, well, there are 2 reasons. First, to tell you how much I love you, and how sorry I am. For the distance, for the silence. I have been a terrible son. I let my work, my life, I let it get in the way, and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I swear it. He was so good, so convincing. His voice was thick with the genuine, and I'm sure, in that moment, a deeply felt emotion. The emotion of a man who is about to get everything he has ever dreamed of. And the second reason, he said, his voice dropping to a low conspiratorial murmur, is your grandson. My heart, my real mother's heart, gave a small, painful little lurch. The one part of me that was not made of ice and steel. My grandson. The little boy I had not seen in 5 years. The one weapon he had that I knew I had no defense against. Tommy, he said, and his voice was now a beautiful, heartbreaking melody of paternal love and regret. He is a wonderful boy, Mom. He's 8 years old now. He's so smart. He's so funny. And he needs to know his grandmother. I've been a fool to keep him from you. It was a terrible, selfish mistake, and I want to fix it. I want to bring him to see you. I want you to finally meet your grandson. I was silent. The tears that came to my eyes were not a performance. They were real. The ghost of the mother I had once been, the loving, forgiving, and foolish woman, she was not quite dead yet. And she was screaming at me to say yes, to forget the pain, to forget the silence, to forget the cruelty, to just say yes. And then I remembered. I remembered the cold, gray, and soul-crushing despair of that one terrible month. I remembered the sound of my own voice, weeping, begging for help. And I remembered the sound of her voice, her brisk, efficient, and utterly dismissive voice, as she told me she was too busy. And the ghost of that loving mother died its final, quiet death. And the queen, the cold, quiet, and victorious queen, took her place. I took a slow, steady breath, and I asked my question, the one I had been rehearsing in the silent, lonely nights for the past year, the one that was the culmination of my entire life, of his entire betrayal. A grandson, I said, and my voice was a quiet, gentle, and genuinely curious thing. Oh, my goodness. That is wonderful news, Michael. I paused, and I let the silence stretch, a beautiful, perfect, and exquisitely cruel silence. But you will have to forgive me. My memory, it's just not what it used to be. You say you have a son? That is wonderful. But which son are you? Names. The silence on the other end of the line was the most satisfying and the most heartbreaking sound I have ever heard. It was the sound of a 50-year-long debt being repaid in full. It was the sound of a beautiful, shiny, and utterly hollow world turning to dust. He didn't speak. He just made a small, choking sound, like a man who has just been punched in the gut. And then I heard a click, and the line went dead. I never heard from him again. I have a new life now. A quiet life. A life filled with new friends, and books, and the sound of the ocean. It is a life that is entirely and beautifully my own. The money is a tool. It is a comfort. But it is not my life. My life is the one I am building now, for myself. I have a new son now as well. Not a son of my body, but a son of my heart. There was a young man, a boy from the orphanage I had helped, a brilliant, kind, and forgotten boy with a genius for music. My foundation is putting him through the finest music conservatory in the country. He calls me every Sunday. He tells me about his week. He plays his cello for me over the phone. And he calls me Mom. I write him. I learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. That sometimes the child you raised is gone forever, replaced by a stranger you do not know and do not owe. And that sometimes the only way to heal your own broken heart is to let them go and to find a new place to put your love. My son, my first son, he erased me from his life. He made me a ghost. He made me a stranger. And in the end, I simply, quietly, and with the most profound and terrible sadness, returned the favor. So, if you are out there and you are being made to feel like an afterthought in the lives of the people you love, remember this old woman. Your love is not a burden. Your life is not an inconvenience. And you are not, and you will never be, worthless. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to simply, quietly, and with all the love in your heart, ask the one simple question that makes them, finally, see the truth. Thank you for letting me share this very difficult story with you. It is a good reminder, I think, that a family is not always the one you are born into, but the one you choose to build. If you have found strength in this tale, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on that little notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And in the comments below, I would love for you to share a story about a time when a simple question changed everything. Love you all. This is Grandma Clara, and I'll see you in the next story.